You're with Julian on the Brown Note in the best period for new albums over the last couple of months that I can remember in probably, well, since before COVID. And another absolute winner, which will destroy me from the worst set of names in the history of music, but the most mind-blowing album I have heard in years. And I wanted to start with a couple of quotes from Lovecraft, as I felt like this opened up a demonic portal. In his house at R'lyeh, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming, which seems to relate to this music. And another one, the god Azathoth is described as being surrounded by the muffled, maddening beating of vile drums and the thin, monotonous whine of accursed flutes. This is music from beyond the veil of sanity. It's Los Thuthanaka, who are a duo. I don't know if they're brothers or whether one of them's non-binary. I've got a feeling that that's the case, but they're definitely siblings. And here we go with the names. They're Bolivian-Americans. So the first person is Chukwumani Kondori, and the other one is Joshua Chukimia Crampton. Didn't expect that surname at the end. And they've both got very long histories in music, have been making music for quite some time and have already fairly extensive discographies. I have a feeling that will solidify around this absolute behemoth, and I'm eternally grateful to Wikipedia for not only having the song titles, but the English translations, which I hadn't actually seen before. There's also, which I'm not going to get into, there's a really good review of this album on Pitchfork, which actually talks to the local tribal or historically non-colonial music that is referenced in this project, which isn't quite like anything else, but is also quite. There's a band called Fuck Buttons, a duo, which made these sort of 10-minute long noise electronica pieces. They don't seem to have done much as a duo for years, but I really like their music, and that was probably one of the most analogous projects. These are very long, often 8 minutes plus, tracks that are analogous to electronic dance music, but in a very, very messed up way. It opens with Kiwanakax Uchiwa, which in English is The Queer People Medicines Are Here. So there's political subtext to a lot of what's going on here, a lot of it colonial and a lot of it relating to things like gender and so on, which I would not have particularly got from not knowing that. The album arrives into beautiful Dayglow focus, which is almost the audible representation of this incredible Dayglow cover on the album, which is maddeningly bright and garish. It's like colour entering a forbidden garden. It's got all these phased organic instruments, a lot of organic instruments on this album. It's like this sort of interplanetary shoreline that's sort of coming in and receding. It reminded me a tiny bit of the intro to Time by Pink Floyd, where you've got all those bells going off. That's kind of what referenced it to me. And then a lot of the tracks have a surprisingly grungy math rock vibe, garage rock vibe going on. And that's true towards the end of that opening track, which is an incredible scene setter. And now we move on to Jalala Ai Lu Pahaza Maka Kalato Pekaza. Victory Ai Lu Pahaza Maka, I don't know. It doesn't actually give you one any more than Victory. Track 2. It's like entering a madness. This is the most heavily muddy and compressed track on it, and it sounds like Cthulhu's got his people dancing around him while he snoozes. Some kind of tribal nightmare, recorded below the floors of a club where it's got a lot of human voices shrieking and stuff going on. Almost a krautrock, Velvet Underground sort of tom vibe on the bass drum. Very claustrophobic. Like everything, every instrument is bleeding at the max. Track 3 is it's got more of a Latin shuffle. This one called Dumb Evil or Hoyano Ipi Sacra. And like this is where we get into this run of 8-minute tracks. And it still sounds like the bass line to these things is almost alt rock guitar riffs in a sort of very muddy, garagey way. It's got a sort of a more listener friendly. It's abrasive still, but it's much more listener friendly than the previous track. It's a real journey, this album, which blew my head off. I didn't even read a review of this album before listening to it, and just sat there for an hour, just going, "What the hell is this?" Very addictive. It's got a lot of very rapid vocal samples. There's always 23 things going on in just about every one of these tracks. The music, the sort of like the overdriven riff on it reminds me of an African band called Kokono Number One, who used like traditional string instruments, but because they were playing next to a busy road for 20 years, they amplified it all through their rudimentary homemade equipment to make this incredibly cacophonous sound. And that's kind of what it reminds me. It's almost 70s prog metal, like very heavy prog metal. And there's quite a lot of developments on these tracks. They do go into these trance-like states, but it's still got quite a lot of development over the course of the runtime. Spring Fount or Hayanu Fuju. It's almost like a gentle reward for having been punished this violently so far on the album. I found it very easy to listen to. If you don't like your music noisy and catastrophic, then you might not. But it's a very gentle track compared to the others, almost like a spacey dub journey. And still with the instrumentation going on. They're like the world's weirdest indie guitar band. And every track on this album, particularly this one, has polyrhythm heaven. There's always like some rhythmic thing happening with some instrument and another rhythmic thing happening with three others that are all interlocking and sort of reaching the same points. It's almost like the band Darkside. If they had never heard Pink Floyd, they just had Pink Floyd described to them around the era of Atom Heart Mother. There's a 3-minute burner for Drivable Cat, Caporal and Nyakaya Titi, which is Drivable Cat. I'm not sure how often in that language it's been used to say the words Drivable Cat. That's just like doom funk. I've written that. I'm going to go through them at the end. I kept writing down different genres that I just made up to try and describe this. The biggest track of all is Queer Grandma, Kulawada Awila, which travels for 11 minutes and 32 seconds, and it's colossal, absolutely colossal. And it's got like pretty clear house pianos and blast beats, because why not? And this is the one that probably reminded me most of the Fuck Buttons material as well. It's Utter Punishment. It reaches, I wrote down Guantanamo Bay Noise Torture. And the Cthulhu Pipers return halfway through. And it's got, it just reaches this punishing vibe where everything is just going, and it just goes on, and there's no escape in any direction. And it's absolutely fabulous. The high point of the album, I think. And a bit like the anthemic stadium guitars that Godspeed You Black Emperor did as well at the end. And that's a massive track followed by 2 more 8-minute long tracks. Track 7 is almost all white noise and ambience. Reminded me of the spiritualized, on the album Ladies and Gentlemen Floating in Space, there's a track that's like a bleed into other tracks that's just this free jazz, almost white noise. It's very much like that. Just like it's got like all of Western music being just pushed into this blender with the people playing the instruments at the time. Reminding me a bit of My Bloody Valentine, of their first Faust album, the krautrock album Faust, when that came out, which had these very like musical collage pieces going on. Very calming track compared to the others. And then we end with a really actually quite hooky number. Cat, Warlock, Ant. Sale Titi Chihiri Sikiti, which is actually quite a decent hooky end to the album as well. It's almost got like a footwork pulse from the percussive side of things, and then like this garage psych rock groove going on, and some really acid garage synths for UK garage rather than garage rock, and the closest thing on the album to a clean mix. And it's got these like almost sparkling sort of Ibiza sort of vibes over the top of it, combined with the usual muddy chaos. They actually come across this album like a jam band with incredibly strange instrumentation. And I put down here Cthulhu prog folk, doom funk, blast house, Dayglow metal, Guantanamo Bay noise torture, death garage, chaos dub, long march Latin. These are my invented genres to try and describe what has now replaced Deafheaven, who replaced Darkside, Los Thuthanaka from Bolivian-American, and the incredible album Los Thuthanaka, which is one of the wildest mindfucks of the modern era of music, and I absolutely adore it. So I'm going to give Los Thuthanaka a 9.5 out of 10 at my new favourite album of an incredible year.